blue. And we want that to be green, and 3 to be blue. There we go. It's got everything, the colors we need it to be. Our 2 main color models. Yes, this is the thing I was talking about before with RGB. The additive model, where you just basically set how much red, how much green, and how much blue. There's one that adds something else to it later, but I won't go into that right now. And the subtractive CMYK, or cyan, magenta, yellow, black model used in print. We're using RGB for this project, so colors begin as black and change as different levels of red, green, and blue are introduced. Easy way to see this is with the CSS RGB function. Create a new CSS rule that targets the class container. And set its background color to black using the RGB with all of the values set to 0, which is black. 0, 0, 0 is black because 0 is the default value and therefore is black. Which looks hideous as fuck, honestly, and we don't want it to stay like that. Functions. A function is a piece of code that can take an input and perform a specific action. The CSS RGB function accepts values or arguments for red, green, and blue and produces a color. Yeah, you would more associate functions with programming rather than styling and design, which is what CSS more is. But CSS does have functions, even if they're a lot more limited in scope and ability than what you'll get later in JavaScript. Okay, each red, green, and blue value is a number from 0 to 255. 0 means there's none of that color, and 255 means there's all of it. For the RGB function in 1, so we're just going to remove that red and get to doing it the way I'm accustomed to set the RGB for red to 255, green to 0, and blue to 0. So there is only red now. As there's none of any other value present, it defaults to being all red. Notice the background color for our marker is still red, as we set it to the red value of the RGB function, which is the max, and both the others to 0. Now we want to do that for the other functions. Green, so green is our second one. We do it like that. Blue, you should be able to figure out by now, based on the acronym that of RGB being red, green, blue, what's going to get the 255 this time. Although it gets a little trickier with specific colors later on. Red, green, and blue are the easiest ones. There are websites you can find, and I encourage you to use them, that you'll be able to actually look up a color and figure out what the RGB value for it will be, which will speed along your design quite a bit, because you don't have to just experiment with numbers to eventually get it right. Well, the red and blue markers look the same. The green one is much lighter than before. is because the green color keyword is actually a darker shade, and it's about halfway between the black and maximum value for green. And in the to rule, what we want to do to get the shade of this one matching up with what we had originally with the green word is to change our 255 we have right here to 127. As you can see, now it matches what we had before, which I didn't say anything about that, and I'm curious now how many of you actually noticed that before the instructions brought it up. In any case, now we need to add a little more vertical space between our markers and the container they are inside. Do that with the padding rule. To add 10 pixels on the top and bottom and none on the left and right. Like so. The additive RGB color model primary colors are that when combined to create pure white, but this to happen each color needs to be at its highest intensity, so when we do any combining, I want to change that back. And now it is time to combine them. So we'll go into the container, look for the RGB here, and set them all to 255, which is how you get white. Secondary colors, eh? Secondary colors are the colors you get when you combine primary colors. You might have noticed some secondary colors in the last step as you change the red, green, and blue values. Yeah, you remember on container in the last step when I was changing us to get that white. There was a moment when we just had 255 red and green when everything turned yellow instead. It's that sort of thing. Which is ironically what we're going to do right here. Like so. Create the next one. Update the RGB function in 2. Combine green and blue. So I want this one to be there. Yeah, just monkeying with the colors of everything, and God, that yellow on the white just hurts my eyes a little to look at. It's awful. For the final one, I want to create magenta by combining red and blue. Didn't change the yellow, sadly, and that one's worse. Now we're familiar with secondary colors, and you'll learn how to create tertiary colors. Tertiary are created by combining a primary with a nearby secondary. To create the tertiary color orange, update the function in the 1 so that red is at its max value and set green to 127. Like that. Which is less awful to look at. So that's a step in the right direction as far as I'm concerned. Notice that to create orange you had to increase the intensity of red and decrease the intensity of the green RGB values. This is because orange is the combination of red and yellow. To create tertiary color spring green, combine cyan with green. Update the RGB function in the 2 CSS rule, that green is at its max value, and set blue to 127. There we go. And to create the tertiary color violet, combine magenta with blue. We want blue at the max and red at 127. There. And this isn't really something that's become apparent just yet, because these are all colors you can do using the standard just color keywords, but one thing you're going to learn as we go along is that you have a lot more options for what kind of colors to create, how many different shades and everything, with RGB rather than just the standard keywords. Because with the keywords, then you have access to just as many colors as there are keywords in CSS. But with this method, you have a stupid number of combinations. Basically, you can combine every number between 0 and 255 with every number between 0 and 255 with every number between 0 and 255. So you have a lot more options, even if some of them are just slightly different shades of one color or another. There's still a lot of them, and that's way more useful than just being able to use whatever keywords are in the system, if you ask me. Let's see here. There are 3 more tertiary colors: chartreuse green, green plus yellow, azure, blue plus cyan, and rose, red plus magenta. Create chartreuse green, update the 1 function so that red is 127 and green is maxed out. Number 2, want green at 127 and blue maxed out. Then number 3, 127 blue, max red. There we go. On to the next one. Now that we've gone through all the primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, it'll be easier to understand color theory concepts and how they impact design. First, adjust the colors of the functions so that each one is set to pure black. So just change these all to zeros. Yeah, there's still plenty of stuff in color theory I do not get in the slightest. So there's a good chance I'll be learning new things about that just as well as you guys. So that'll be fun. Though I doubt I'll be learning it from FreeCodeCamp. I've gone through this program a few new times already. So yeah. A color wheel is a circle where similar colors or hues are near each other, and different ones are further apart. For example,